Hi, I'm Chad.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is Success with Chad and Kelly.
Ever feel like you're just, pushing a boulder uphill when it comes to making actually lasting changes?
Mm-hmm.
You're not alone.
In today's deep dive, we are going to crack the code of habits, the good, the bad, and everything in between.
Oh, I like that.
With, of course, insights from Atomic Habits by James Clear. Have you heard of this book?
Oh, absolutely. This book is, it's everywhere, and for good reason. What I find so fascinating about it is how he takes all this sciencey stuff about habits
Right.
and makes it actually, usable.
Practical.
Yeah. It's not just about wishing you were different. It's about understanding the mechanics of how those habits actually form and then how we can use that knowledge.
And Clear doesn't just preach this stuff. He walks the walk.
Yeah.
The book opens with this crazy story.
Book about a freak baseball accident he had in high school.
Right.
Completely upended his life.
He was bad.
Talking broken bones, facial fractures.
Mm.
Even a displaced eyeball.
It's intense.
So obviously,
Yeah.
long road to recovery. And through that process, he realizes that it's not about these grand gestures.
Mhm.
It's the series of tiny wins that actually make the difference.
Exactly. And that's the heart of that atomic concept, right? Is these small changes that when you apply them consistently lead to massive results over time. It's like the compound interest of self-improvement.
I like that. The compound interest. Yeah. Okay, so it's less about me becoming superhuman overnight
Right.
and more about setting up those systems for making it actually happen.
Consistency is key.
Consistency is key. Okay.
Yeah.
He gives a bunch of examples in the book, right? How this applies to everything from money
Oh, yeah. He covers it all.
to clutter to everything. Right.
Think about it. Wanting to save thousands of dollars?
Daunting.
Daunting. It's overwhelming. But breaking it down,
Yeah.
packing your lunch a couple days a week instead of eating out or cutting back on a few subscriptions you don't really use,
Easy.
those tiny wins, they add up. And it's not just about the doing, it's about how we measure, even just in our own heads, how do we measure success?
So you're talking about those lagging measures he talks about.
Yes.
Explain that to me.
Okay, imagine this. You're checking your bank balance.
Okay. I do that.
Right, that number, that's the result, right? That's a lagging indicator of all your spending habits over weeks or months, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Clear's argument. Fixating only on that final outcome, like trying to steer a car by only looking in the rearview mirror.
You're about to make me very aware of my spending habits as we speak.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's all about those small adjustments along the way.
So how do we shift from being rear view mirror people
Right.
to being more focused on the now?
Systems. Systems. Clear compares it to the melting point of ice. You apply heat, nothing seems to happen at all. But then 32 degrees, boom, melts. All that effort, though, it wasn't wasted. You were building to that tipping point. He calls this the plateau of latent potential.
Okay, so those first few weeks of working out,
Yeah,
when you don't see a difference on the scale, but something's happening.
exactly. It's happening at a cellular level. Atomic Habits is all about trusting that process, building systems that support those tiny changes, and understanding that even when we don't see those immediate, Instagram-worthy results, our efforts, they
Yeah.
are compounding.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
So we were building systems, not chasing those outcomes.
There you go.
Okay, so we're building systems, not chasing outcomes.
Yeah.
I like it. But where do we even, how do we even start? How do we figure out what those systems should be? Clear talks about this whole habit loop thing.
Yeah, the habit loop. This is where things get really, really interesting. It's
Juicy.
juicy. We're peeking behind the curtain of our own brains, right?
I like it.
So the habit loop, it's this 4-step pattern, right? Cue, craving, response, and then reward.
Okay, so is this that whole thing, Pavlov's dogs?
Yes.
Ring a bell and
Spasm.
exactly they start drooling.
So they hear the bell, that's the cue. They start drooling, craving that food. They gobble it up, the response, and then boom,
Reward. Happy tummy.
reward. Right, satisfied tummy. But here's the thing. For us, the rewards, they aren't always that straightforward. You know what I mean?
Right. It's a little more nuanced.
Way more nuanced. And Clear uses these really interesting Well, I think they're interesting. He uses these examples from the animal kingdom to kind of illustrate this. Like, remember those baby gull?
Oh, the ones that peck at the red spot on their mom's beak for food?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hardwired into those little bird brains.
It's instinct.
Total instinct. And then there was this animal behaviorist, Tinbergen, who found that geese, they'll instinctively roll anything around, like a volleyball even, into their nests as if it were an egg. They're driven by these, like, innate patterns.
That's kind of scary though, right?
Yeah.
Because how much of my behavior is me just like on autopilot following these patterns? I don't even realize. Like maybe me snacking late at night isn't like an actual personal failing,
Yeah.
but just my brain being like, store those calories. Winter is coming.
You are spot on. That is a crucial point.
Okay.
And Clear talks about this, how our brains evolved in this environment where food was scarce. So naturally, we're hardwired to crave sugary, fatty things, survival, right? But in our world today, world of abundance,
Right.
those cravings, they don't always do us any favors.
So it's like my brain's living in the Stone Age, even though I have, a smartphone.
In a way, yeah. And this is where understanding dopamine comes in. Dopamine, it gets a bad rap. The pleasure chemical,
Right.
It's a lot more complex than that.
It's not just about like feeling good, right?
Right.
So what's it actually doing in this whole habit loop?
Okay, so dopamine, it's about motivation. It's about learning. And it's about encoding memories. It's basically the signal to our brain, like, hey, remember this thing you did led to something rewarding. Let's do it again.
Okay.
So let's say you're scrolling through social media, you get that little dopamine surge. It reinforces that behavior.
And that's how we get like hooked, even if it doesn't make us actually feel good in the long run.
Yes, because our brain remembers that dopamine hit.
Fascinating.
Right. And Clear really dives into how we can actually use this knowledge to our benefit. We can make good habits more rewarding and bad habits less appealing to our, dopamine-driven brains.
Okay, now we're talking. This is what I want to know. How do we hack it?
All right. Well, this is where he brings in the 4 laws of behavior change. And they basically provide this framework for hacking each step of that habit loop.
Okay, love it.
So we're making the cues for good habits obvious. We make the rewards attractive, the actions easy, and the overall experience satisfying.
All right, I am ready to make some changes. Let's break it down. Let's start with that first one, making it obvious. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, but I'm guessing it's probably a little more complicated than that.
You're right. It's not just about saying, I want to meditate more. We've got to get specific, right? So Clear calls this setting implementation intentions. Basically, you're deciding ahead of time exactly when and where that habit's going to happen.
So instead of meditate more, it's like, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes right after my morning coffee.
Yes. You took the guesswork out. Now it's less about willpower and more about following through on the plan that you set for yourself.
I like it.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. So Clear argues that our environment, it plays a huge role in shaping those habits. And he talks about this concept called Lewin's equation.
Lewin's equation. Sounds intimidating.
It's really not that complicated. Basically, it states that behavior, how we act, it's a function of both the person and the environment that they're in.
Interesting.
So someone who, we look at and think, oh, they're so naturally good at that thing, maybe they just have an environment that really supports those good habits.
Wait, so you're saying it's not all on me? What a relief.
Mhm.
But, like, how do I even begin to change my environment to make those better choices?
So Clear gives this great example. There was this study done in Pakistan, and they wanted to increase hand washing rates, right?
Okay.
They found that just by providing nicer soap
Seriously?
made a huge difference.
Wow, so nicer soap made people wash their hands more?
She did.
Yeah.
It's wild, right? But it just highlights this key idea. Reducing that friction, even in small ways, can have a huge impact on our behavior.
Interesting.
And businesses, they've mastered this. They make things so easy and so satisfying for us to engage with their products, Like, think about it. It's
Add to cart.
exactly.
It's too easy.
So if you want to read more, stop blaming the busy schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Put a book you're actually excited to read on your bedside table.
Okay.
You've got to design that environment to work for you, not against you. It's about making those good habits the path of least resistance.
Okay, this is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So by making these, like, tiny changes to our actual physical environment,
Mm-hmm.
we can kind of nudge ourselves in the right direction. But what about, like, the mental game?
Mhm.
How do our beliefs and, like, how we see ourselves
Yeah.
play into all of this?
So that's where we get into the really, really transformative stuff with this, I think. Clear's argument is that real, true habit change, it's actually identity change.
Ooh.
It's not just about doing things differently, it's about seeing yourself as a different person.
So instead of me being like, I'm trying to quit smoking, I need to be like, I'm a non-smoker.
Nail on the head. You've got to align those actions with that identity that you're trying to build.
Okay.
Every time you resist that cigarette, that's like a vote for non-smoker.
I like that.
The more votes you cast, the stronger that identity gets.
So it's like that saying, dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Yes.
Like if I see myself as a writer, even if I'm like just starting out, I'm way more likely to actually sit down and write.
100%. Because your environment, it influences your behavior. We talked about that. But so does your self-image and how you see yourself.
Right.
So
It's all connected.
it's this powerful feedback loop.
Okay, I'm like fully on board.
Okay.
But how do you actually make that shift? Because it feels very fake it till you make it, and I'm not very good at that.
And that's the thing. It's not about faking it. It's about proving it to yourself through consistently showing up.
Okay.
Every tiny step that you take towards that goal, it's a vote for that person that you want to be.
So it's a process. It's not just this like overnight thing.
Yes.
You build it over time.
You build that identity through those small wins. And this actually ties into another really key idea from Atomic Habits, and it's this idea of finding your unique advantage.
Okay, I like that.
Clear says, instead of trying to be good at everything, why not focus on the areas where you're naturally inclined, where your abilities give you a little bit of an edge?
So I shouldn't beat myself up if I'm not like a morning person.
Right.
But I can, like, after dinner time, I can crank out work like nobody's business.
Exactly.
Some things just come more naturally.
Of course. We all have our rhythms, right? Understand your strengths, your rhythms, and then align those ambitions, the things that you want to achieve with, like, where you already naturally are.
Okay. It reminds me of Michael Phelps.
Oh, yeah.
He was, like, clearly he was built for swimming. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But he still put in the work.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Like, he still trained relentlessly to become an Olympic champion.
And that's what's so important. Genes, they don't eliminate the work.
Right.
They just clarify it. Right.
Yeah.
They show us where our efforts are going to be the most effective.
It's about working smarter, not just harder.
Exactly.
I love it.
Great.
Okay, so big takeaways from Atomic Habits. It's not about checking things off a to-do list.
Nope.
It's about understanding how our brains work,
Yes.
designing our environment to actually help us succeed,
Love it.
and aligning our habits with the person we actually want to become.
It's a holistic approach to, like, being a better you.
Yes.
And it's grounded in science, but it gives you practical things that you can use today.
I like it. Well, that's our deep dive on Atomic Habits. It's been so fascinating.
It has.
I've liked chatting with you.
Likewise.
And listeners, remember, even those tiny changes that we've been talking about, compounded over time, huge results.
Huge.
Think about it. What is one small habit, just one, but you could start building today to become the person you want to be?
Yes.
It's all about those atomic changes. Thanks for joining us.